Upon recalling byproducts of the great international exhibitions we know as World's Fairs, what immediately comes to mind is 1889's Eiffel Tower. As iconic and architecturally significant as the Eiffel Tower is, though, there's an example a little closer to home that you may be a bit more familiar with. At the 1939 New York World's Fair, visitors were introduced to General Motors' exhibit Futurama, a sprawling one-acre model showcasing a miniaturized network of expressways, cities, farmlands, and suburbs in the America of 1959. Over the past 80 years, that network has evolved into what we know as the U.S. highway system. I'm Duncan Brady, and this is the Futurama in Context. In order to even approach a vision of the future like GM's Futurama, it's important to first understand the fundamental changes that took place which allowed it to happen. Firstly, the notion that new is better is younger than you might think. Prior to the age of the Enlightenment in the 18th century, the idea of progress was one tied to the past, in that new tech was developed to bring us closer to the purity of man's first days on Earth. With the changes in ideology and authority structures associated with that time period, new technologies began to be seen as progress toward a new kind of future. And what a future it would be. Railroad development in the United States spread out communities and brought our Industrial Revolution, and the American system of manufacturing brought the mass-produced automobile, Ford's Model T. The urban and rural adoption of the mass-market motor car spread those communities even wider. Contrary to the speed at which Ford's Highland Park factory could spit out automobiles, the American road system was severely lacking. Of the 2.5 million miles of disconnected road in the U.S. in 1913, most were better suited to horse and buggy travel. For cars, the miles were rough and dusty in the dry and completely inaccessible in the wet. That soon would change. The announcement of the new coast-to-coast Lincoln Highway came in 1913, which would provide a means for travel connecting communities rather than the disorganized roads used to travel within them. The Lincoln Highway would set a precedent for the countless auto trails that would connect American settlements in the coming decades. Fortunately for us, those coming years weren't so hot. A stock market crash in 1929 catalyzed the Great Depression, which would define life in America and around the world for decades. For those living through the Depression, the present was miserable, and they were all too ready to be wowed by a bright mind showing them a vision of a bright future. That mind belonged to one Norman Bel Geddes. A career that started in stage design led Geddes to his own design studio, where he would design futuristic concepts like this 9-story amphibian airliner with amenities not unlike a modern cruise ship. His skill and imagination caught the attention of the Shell Oil Company. In the mid-1930s, Geddes was commissioned by Shell Oil to produce a scale model of a city of tomorrow, one that solved foreseeable traffic problems and unsurprisingly favored the petroleum industry. This would be Geddes' first attempt at envisioning the future of America's highway system, and it prepared him for a second project on a much, much larger scale. At the 1939 New York World's Fair, General Motors stole the show with the Norman Bel Geddes designed Futurama. Guests would line up by the thousands to experience the animated city model, which featured an 18-minute chair ride over the top of the exhibit. 5 million visitors saw Futurama that summer, and its impact is still felt today. Part of why Futurama was so captivating in 1939 was its sheer scale. The model featured over 500,000 individual buildings, 1 million trees, and 50,000 automobiles navigating a 14-lane expressway and its surrounding road network. It took up the equivalent space of 12 basketball courts. And it was designed around Geddes' core highway design principles of safety, comfort, speed, and economy. The road system theorized a 150-mile-an-hour transcontinental superhighway, cars that can be driven safely even with the driver's hands off the wheel, and a 24-hour trip from San Francisco to New York that would have taken 24 days on the Lincoln Highway. Fast forward 60 or so years to today, and it's obvious Geddes was onto something. Modern cities are indeed connected by massive interstate highways, which provide daily transit to millions of American drivers. And that driver's hands off the wheel bit, not only has it arrived, but it's being pioneered by American auto manufacturers. Today, you can buy a countless array of vehicles with self-driving capabilities. Tesla may have made a splash with their misleadingly named and arguably rushed-to-market autopilot software, but a more impressive experience can be had from the very same company that hired Norman Bel Geddes in 1939. General Motors subsidiary Cadillac has been working on an autonomous system of their own, which debuted in 2018 on their flagship CT6. While competitor systems have boasted lane keep assist and radar cruise control for a couple years, they frequently require the driver to retake control and grip the helm. In 2018, Cadillac has made Norman Bel Geddes a very happy man. In a Cadillac CT6, he could drive from San Francisco to New York, never leaving an interstate expressway, and never putting his hands on the wheel. That's the highway of the future.